So SCAPE, as a firm, we're always interested in pursuing projects that are close to home, and especially with this project, it's a little smaller scale, but we're always sort of looking after projects that pursue social infrastructure. This seemed like the perfect opportunity. This library, the funding came partly from the Greenpoint Environmental Fund, which came after a state settlement with the ExxonMobil oil spill in Newtown Creek, which was one of the largest inland oil spills in U.S. history. And so there's been a long history of sort of environmental degradation in the Greenpoint neighborhood, and this is sort of one of the ways to try to rectify some of that. And the community really responded to sort of creating this sort of institution of education and also sort of stewardship. So that's how the Brooklyn Public Library branch came to make this into not only turn it into also an environmental education center. We collaborated with Marble Fairbanks, who designed the building, and we worked with them on another project at the Glen Oaks Library in Queens. And through that, we've really sort of started to understand the impact that even a small expanded plaza streetscape can have on the community, and sort of the social integration between the programming inside the library and the landscape outdoors, and really providing an area for not only education but hands-on stewardship and doing. So the ground floor is really inspired by the geological formations of the history of Greenpoint. You can see the boulders here are situated in the pattern of the Laurendite ice sheet. Some 18,000 years ago, the ice sheet was over 2,000 feet tall and covered all of Brooklyn. And the boulders are arranged in the pattern that the ice sheet retreated. And so the plaza really references that geological history. And also a big part of the design of the landscape out here is managing stormwater runoff. So over here behind me is a bioswale that really stores and captures and infiltrates rainwater during storms, so it doesn't back up into the sewer system. And there's also standing on top of pervious paving that helps to decrease the amount of runoff that goes into the street. And all of the plants are inspired by the northeastern forests. They're mostly native plants, and so that sort of provides some wildlife and habitat value as well. So we're on the second floor roof right now, which is the reading room. You can see there's a large planter and expanded bench that is meant to accommodate a flexible range of activities, more sort of like a refuge for readers to come up here, read a book. It can also accommodate about like 25 to 30 students in non-COVID times. So it's functioned sort of like an outdoor classroom. There's a big connection between like the indoor and the outdoor space. So the program from inside at their educational labs is meant to sort of spill over into this outdoor area. And all the planting here was designed for winter interest. So there's a lot of shrubs that sort of cover the plant beds. There's a lot of fruit-bearing shrubs that also provide food for birds and insects that can then disperse it throughout the neighborhood. And yeah, the sort of bench is called the nest, which is sort of meant to reference the bird's nest found on the higher level. Right behind me is a rainwater cistern that holds about 1,500 gallons of rainwater that's captured from the third level roof. So any runoff from there is sort of flows by gravity down that pipe into the cistern, and then it's used to irrigate the plants on this level. And also there's a pump on the third floor that is used to water the plants on the beds up there. The project, the whole project exceeds LEED Gold, so part of the landscape systems and functions that contribute to that are the sort of rainwater capture with the cistern, the pervious paving and sort of stormwater management at the ground floor. The sedum roof on the third floor helps absorb stormwater and also sort of provide some cooling benefits during the summer, reduce the need for air conditioning. And native plants also help reduce the need for a lot of irrigation. So we're on the third floor right now at the demonstration garden. You can see there's these rows of raised beds, planters, that are meant to worked with the community and the library staff to plant edible food and sort of teach kids and community members about sustenance and growing their own food. On the sort of outer ring, you can see the flatter, more sedum-covered green roof, which is sort of manages some of the stormwater runoff and also provides some cooling effects for the building below. There are sort of like stripes of flowering perennials that provide some pollinator habitat and also reference sort of the history of Greenpoint and the Polish agricultural history of the neighborhood. And yeah, eventually in post-COVID, these beds are going to be, these are sort of some placeholder plants right now, but eventually they'll sort of be sort of filled with edibles that are chosen by community members. Also part of the program of the demonstration garden on the third floor is this rainwater harvesting pump that pumps up water from the cistern of the captured runoff from the third level. And this is meant to be used to water the plants up here. As you can see, sort of pumping the water, you can start to fill up buckets and use it as sort of like an educational tool about storing rainwater and runoff on site, which contributes to the overall health and vitality of the landscape and reducing the sort of strain on our combined sewer systems in the neighborhood. Also behind me are some solar panels on top of the roof that actually generate energy from the sun, not only from the top, but from below, from light reflected from below them. And there's some sort of educational panels inside the building that help people monitor the energy use of the building and see how much sort of energy is conserved using all the sort of landscape features and also the way that the building is situated and designed for passive heating and cooling. So we're on the ground level in the sort of streetscape plaza of the Greenpoint Library. Just to touch upon some of the material choices in the landscape and sort of coordination with the architecture. The boulders that you see behind me and sort of like integrated in the striations of the plant beds. They not only reference the geological formations and sort of gesture of the glacial ice sheets historically, but they also, part of the concept for the landscape design was to reuse some of the more one-off pieces in the quarries. So these boulders were sourced from a quarry in upstate New York locally. And during the quarrying process, it sort of leaves a lot of smaller pieces that aren't normally used in landscape design. So all these smaller sort of like boulder skins were used and sort of recycled in the design and sort of form the concept of sort of like the glacial erratics and terminal moraine of the plaza. So another sort of material distinction in the benches, the wood is a thermary ash, which is meant to weather into this grayish hue over time and also match the hue of the building cladding. So the same sort of type of wood is used, and the board formed concrete, the gray of the concrete there is over time will match the gray of the benches. So I'm working on sort of public projects and especially libraries. As I mentioned, SCAPE as a firm is super interested in pursuing these types of social infrastructure projects that really tie together the cultural, geological, and ecological histories of a site. I think the Brooklyn Public Library is trying to revitalize 1/3 of their local branches. A lot of sort of the libraries have this sort of like brutalist or sort of defensive architecture. The building here that used to be here, that was built in the 70s, was a sort of like very sort of like, it looked like a barracks and wasn't as inviting to the community as the public, especially the landscape. But the sort of like uniqueness of getting the grant from the Environmental Fund and being able to redesign the building and sort of integrate the landscape and architecture really provided a unique opportunity for this site. And that's why sort of like we sort of ingrained the concept of the 3 different levels and accommodating 3 different flexible program spaces that allow hands-on education and learning, both in to sort of be fluid between the indoor library program and the outdoor landscape function. I think that some of the sort of the libraries in general provide that unique and challenging opportunity of working with the renovations of existing structures, but hopefully some of the lessons learned here of that sort of like really deeply ingrained cultural and geological references and the impact that it can have on communities, and sort of providing a space for people to connect and really reveal some of the histories that have been covered up over time. Hopefully that can provide a lesson for future renovations and projects.